Hello and welcome to another installment of Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner, and we're talking all that is Minnesota Twins as they've gone through the first now 6 games of the season. They are now 4-2 after a disappointing series in Miami, where they lose 2 out of 3, winning the first game 11-1, and then faltering the next couple of games after. And it's kind of been the Twins the last couple of years. Offense has a really big game, and then the bats grow weirdly quiet for the next couple. Now, the Twins face 2 of the best pitchers that they could face all season long in Sandy Alcantara and also Jesus Luzardo. It's going to be tough. You're going to have a tough time against, first of all, Alcantara, who you couldn't touch him. They just weren't going to be able to do anything, especially with Buxton out of the lineup. You could see Rocco kind of conceding that game a little bit to allow, because at the time, again, it was supposed to be a back-to-back. The Twins were supposed to have their home opener today. Instead, it got moved to Friday. So I could see in Rocco's mind, if you give Buxton that day off, he plays in the rubber match, and then you can play him on the back-to-back days for the home opener. But either way, the Twins lose 2 out of 3 in Miami. It's a bit of a disappointing series, but I still think there's some positive things to take away from that. So first, let's start on the negatives. The negatives, as we talked about, is this offense can grow kind of cold. Again, now they've gone to 4-2 on the season. Now it's a 108 win pace. So let's calm down for 5 seconds here. But for anybody overreacting about the first series, again, a disappointing couple of games, especially after the way the Twins jumped on Johnny Cueto early. He left with an injury. The Twins pounced on a couple of their bullpen guys, and were just able to get a 10 run win, 11-1. Now, the one thing for Miami is that they just left. I think they finished the game only pitching 3 guys, and it allowed their bullpen to go the rest of the series, although they really didn't need them, considering Alcantara pitched a complete game the next day, and then Luzardo went 7 innings. So either way, still just a good mop-up job by the Miami bullpen, but either way, the Twins got win number 1 in that series, and then the bats went really quiet. And now Alcantara, whatever. I mean, you just chalk it up. He's a good pitcher. You move on. You live another day. And the one thing I've noticed in the first couple games, and that might have been the plan of attack, is don't let Alcantara get comfortable. Attack him early in the count, because you don't want him to get ahead 0-2, 0-1 on you, because then you're just in his paw anyways. So you might as well try and swing at that first pitch. And I don't mind that strategy necessarily. The downside of it is you end up kind of bailing out the pitcher sometimes. Maybe not bailing out, but you just end up putting him in a more advantageous spot if you're not getting on base, and the Twins weren't getting on base. So Alcantara not only was getting outs, but he was getting relatively easy outs. He didn't have to sweat. He did a complete game, 9 innings in 100 pitches. I think Alcantara has 6 complete games in the last 3 seasons, and no other pitcher has more than 2 complete game shutouts. And just goes to show you, 1, Alcantara just an animal, and 2, an animal in this specific day of pitching where you don't see complete games and complete game shutouts, let alone. He's a good pitcher. I'm going to gush over him. So, you can see why the Marlins were willing to trade Pablo Lopez, considering they had Alcantara and Luzardo in their pitching staff, and they still have Max Meyer, who's a Minnesota kid. They still have a Cabrera, whose first name Edward Cabrera, who's a good pitcher as well. We talked about all these Miami pitchers, remember, in the offseason when we talked about the Twins potentially trying to trade for a starting pitcher. Pablo Lopez was the most obvious choice, but a couple of the guys were thrown in the mixing just in case it wasn't him, or maybe the Twins had eyes on a bigger fish, unintended, from Miami. But for the Twins, to go against some of this tough pitching, it stinks, and you can throw your hands up in the air and say, whatever, we faced a good pitcher. At the end of the day, this is still a team that is trying to make the playoffs, so, whatever. Not overreacting to a loss, but at the same time, you'd hope for a little bit better, considering you still had Correa in the lineup, you still had Miranda, and you still had Larnach. I mean, outside of Buxton, you pretty much ran through the main core. Now, you didn't have Max Kepler, who hit a home run in the first at-bat of game 1 and then left in the 4th inning due to knee soreness. He hasn't played. He didn't play against Alcantara. No, he didn't play against Luzardo because he's a lefty, so he wasn't going to play even if he's healthy. It'll be interesting to see if Max Kepler is healthy, because there's a left-handed corner outfielder in St. Paul who's gotten his season started off in 4 games, but gotten started off on the right foot, who could be kind of knocking on the door, especially if Kepler's either not healthy or not producing. Anyway, so the Twins, go into game 3, and they have Duran. They pretty much have their main bullpen guys to use, and then they face Luzardo. So he's a lefty, and you're going to have to deal with that. The Twins go with their right-handed heavy lineup. The Twins have a lot of righties, whether it's Buxton, Correa, Farmer, Solano, Jeffers. I mean, there's a bunch of right-handed bats throughout the lineup. Michael A. Taylor, guys who you think that you can put out there and you think can do well in this situation. Now, I think Larnach has earned the opportunity to go lefty-lefty, considering he took a lefty reliever to dead center on Monday night. And Larnach has just had a good enough series. He got the one RBI single off Luzardo in the seventh or eighth inning, because he just had a good approach. He was able to just inside out swing, get that thing where you need to, slapping it the other way. But Larnach has been a good development. Again, that's a positive. But I think in this final game of the series against Luzardo, it wasn't so much the Twins. You could look at the Twins bullpen because, of course, Jax came in and had a couple guys get on base. Theobar came in and struck out a rise of all people, swinging, and then gave up a bomb to Soler, and game was pretty much over at that point. So again, the blame in this series goes on the bats. And again, you're facing two really good pitchers. At the same time, you have a good lineup as well. And you talk about veteran depth. You should at least be able to do a little bit better than you did. And it gets to the question of Alcantara, you can throw to, they're good pitchers. Again, as we've mentioned plenty of times already. The thing about it is the Twins lineup against lefties is a little concerning. So left-handed pitchers like Luzardo, the Twins weren't very good, but it's one game, so you can't judge it off that. But if you do judge it off last season, the Minnesota Twins were not a great team when it came to facing right-handed pitching. So in 2022, in terms of weighted runs created, plus in terms which is a stat that again shows how much how much runs a team can create. 100 is the league average, and 100 is average. And then of course, it kind of flexes it over 162 games, rounds it out per ballpark, does all that kind of stuff. The Twins weren't dead last, but they sat about 19th. So they're below average. Twins are below average in terms of average, OPS, whatever stat you want to use. The Twins were hovering around that 18 to 21 mark in the league against left-handed pitching. And again, if you're the Royals, it's not great, but you're not, whatever, you're a rebuilding team. If you're the Twins who are trying to compete for a playoff position, you just can't do that. And of course, coming from 19 and 20, where the Twins hit lefties generally well, of course, more so in 2019, to see that drop off in 2021 and now 2022, and even one game in 23. So let's not overreact here, but just based on the prior knowledge and then based on one game in this new season, it's just going to be something that we're going to have to monitor. Now, Correa and Buxton being back should help, generally speaking, especially when you consider that the Twins' numbers against righties were factored in when it was the end of the season and the Twins were throwing out a double-A lineup. So whatever. But at the same time, it's just something to be concerned about. Anyway, I don't want to delve too much into the concerns with this team because they're 4-2 and they've played well enough. And I think the pitching itself is enough reason for you to go, it's not ideal that we lost 2 or 3 against Miami. They're going to finish 4th in their division. Best case scenario, maybe the Phillies or the Mets take a step back and they have a nice year and they can finish 3rd. But there's not a lot of Miami Marlins hype train that can build. Their pitching is great. Their lineup is a little hit or miss, considering that Miami only scored 1 run in the first 2 games and then scored 5 in game 3. So throughout that series, they only scored 7 runs. The Twins technically outscored them. If you look at, they scored 12 runs, but again, they scored a bunch of them in game 1, got shut out in game 2, only mustered up 2 runs in game 3. So it's 13-2, or whatever, you get my point, 13-7. Either way. So with this series, I think it just goes to show how great this pitching is. So now we've gone one time through the order, and Dustin Morse of Twins Communications put this out, and he talked about the stats of this Twins team 1 trip through the order plus, with Pablo Lopez making a start in Miami against his former team. Looked great, by the way. Gave up the one home run, but outside of that, put his team, when you only give up one run over 6 innings, it puts your team in a great position to win a ball game. So looking at the Twins stats the first time through the lineup and trying to find the right tweet here from Dustin Moore. So Twins starters to open the season. Pablo Lopez pitched 5 1/3, no earned runs, 2 hits. Gray had 5 innings, no earned runs, 3 hits. Ryan, 6 innings, 1 earned run, 3 hits. Malley, 5 innings, pitched 1 earned run, 3 hits. Of course, Maeda was able to pitch 1 run ball in his first start as well. Kenta was the one question mark, Kenta and Malley, because of the injury history. Both didn't have great springs, and people thought, oh no, why are we even giving Kenta the time of day? Why isn't Bailey Ober here? And I understand that. I think Ober's a good pitcher, so I'm not trying to, I get what Twins fans who think that are saying. I'm not saying they're inherently wrong, but I am saying that we sometimes overvaluate spring training because it's the only sample size we get, and get to the regular season and let's see what happens. When everybody's in full game mode and nobody's working on things or testing things, it's full speed ahead. And Kenta Maeda had a great debut, not just with the results, not just the fact that he pitched 1 run ball and put the Twins in a position to win the ball game. It's the fact of he got a lot of swings and misses. He got things to go where he wanted them to go. And it looked a lot more like 2020 Kenta Maeda more than it did 2021 Kenta Maeda. So that's a benefit for the Twins. Now, Kenta Maeda replicating being a Cy Young runner-up, I'm not saying that's happening, but if you can get somewhere in between 2020 and 2021 Kenta Maeda, that's a solid number 5 starter. And they can do something with that. Now, it stinks that Ober's got to be down in AAA, but to say that all 5 guys in the rotation are going to be healthy all season long, it's just not going to happen. So the Twins rotation right now, really, really good. Pablo Lopez is looking phenomenal. He's looking every bit of the part of the guy that the Twins traded for. Now he faced the Royals and the Marlins, so not, we'll see what happens when he faces a more dangerous lineup like the White Sox next week. He avoids the Astros, who are coming to Target Field for the home opener on Friday. But I'm going to be at the game on Saturday, by the way. So excited to see that matchup and to see Joe Ryan pitch. But I think the Twins rotation one way through the order, it's that picture of LeBron. I saw this on Twitter. It's a picture of LeBron after the trade deadline in 2018 with Cleveland. And it's just that we got an effing squad now. And that's pretty much what it is, because this is the first time I've been legitimately excited about a Minnesota Twins rotation 1 through 5. Now, Barrios has always been a guy to talk about. Maeda's always been up there. And again, Joe Ryan was exciting. Sonny Gray was a good get. But now to get this rotation 1 through 5 is every single night you go out there and you think this guy could pitch well enough to win us the game. It wasn't Bundy or Archer where it's like, please, just can you get through 4 innings without blowing up? Can you just do that? It's not a Matt Schumacher. It's not even, and I love Kyle Gibson more than most people. But again, Kyle Gibson, there's just, please, just don't have 3 innings of like 8-run ball. Can you not do that? And the Twins have nobody on this team who you're scared of blowing up at any point. Everybody who goes out there for the Twins rotation, and by the way, even if they call up Ober or Louis Varland, there's not like this guy is not it. Like this is, it's not the Twins trying out Homer Bailey in 2020. I mean, this is a good rotation. It's legitimately exciting. And the fact that there's actual depth in the minors. So it is intriguing. It is going to be fun to watch in terms of the starting pitching with this Twins team. And not only that, we've already seen Rocco start to trust the starters and let them go deeper into games, which again, is it a chicken or the egg? Is Rocco only letting his starters go deep because he didn't believe in them, or is he only letting them go that deep because they felt like that was the best way to win? And did one way influence the other more and more? And again, I lean towards the camp of the Twins pitching just wasn't good. Like you gotta pitch better to get deeper into games. Now, sometimes they held back Ryan a little bit, and Sonny Gray was injured and didn't perform as well as maybe his overall stats suggest. I'm not saying he had a bad season, but he wasn't particularly phenomenal to always consistently get into the 7th inning in each game. But you're seeing now that the Twins rotation is proving they're good. And when you prove that they're good, you can get that extra inning. You can get that 3rd time through the order. It wasn't just that Rocco was taking a pitcher out after only getting 4 innings and 85 pitches. It's that it took them 85 pitches to get through the order twice and you're in the 4th inning. Like again, and whether the pitch clock has helped with that, whether the bad lineups have played with that, I think when you look at the Twins rotation, you just have to say that they're going to get the benefit of the doubt more often than not because they're better pitchers. Sonny Gray is healthy. The Twins have more confidence in Sonny Gray with the full offseason with the Twins. Joe Ryan is another year older, and Pablo Lopez is here, and he's got plenty of talent. And then, of course, you have Kenta Maeda coming back, who's the veteran as well. Same thing with Tyler Mahle. So, again, I think it's not necessarily that the Twins backed away from last year's approach because they thought it was wrong inherently, and they were seeing the error of their ways. Now, it didn't work out for them, obviously, but it didn't work out because they didn't have good pitching, and the pitching fell apart, even like outside of a few high-end guys. 1 through 5 or 1 through 8 in the bullpen was not ideal. And now you're seeing that depth play out a little bit more. Jorge Alcala, Giovanni Moran haven't had, stellar starts to the season for Moran, but at the same time, Jorge Alcala, the Twins have a soft underbelly of the bullpen when it comes to Moran probably and Emilio Pagan. But when you look at the top 6 guys, there's definitely some there and some things that the Twins can use. And again, if the starters go deeper, it means you're relying less on Duran. Duran hasn't even pitched this week, which some people say they love. Some people are glad that he gets to rest. Some people are upset that he didn't get to pitch at all in the Miami series, which again, I would have liked to see him pitch, but I'm not going to lose sleep over something that's happening. I'm not going to be overly critical in the first week, first full week of the season. So that's good for the Twins. We talked about the lineups issues against lefties, but at the same time, it was nice to see Joey Gallo hit another bomb on Monday night. It was nice to see Trevor Larnach get his first home run of the season, and also nice to see Kepler get that first one too. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, left the game in the 4th inning. So I think just some other news and notes. Larnach, has looked strong through this first week and change. And again, I mentioned it all throughout spring training. Larnach, when healthy, is a very good major league player. He showed that, but he just was hurt and he was battling through some injuries, which is why his overall stats don't look as good. But give Trevor Larnach time and he will be a good player. And he got overlooked and almost wasn't going to make the team, except for Kirilloff and Polanco getting hurt. And I'm really glad he did. I had the faith in Larnach to be able to have a good season, and it's fun to see that showing up. Now, again, it's only 6 games in. We're not trying to read too much into it, but it's highly encouraging. It's better than the alternative, and Larnach has been a big help getting into the cleanup spot right away, especially, and contributing for the Twins. Ryan Jeffers has only had 2 starts so far this season, but has had a couple RBIs in the first start and then hit a really good double the other way into the right center field gap against the Luzardo on Wednesday. So it's nice for Jeffers, who maybe in this limited role will be better for him, at least get him a little more experience, and again, learning behind Vasquez and just motivating him a little bit to know he's got to earn his keep. Not saying he wasn't motivated before, but you get that little extra motivation now that you're playing behind somebody, or at least getting your starts. It's not as quite of a 50-50 as it was when Gary Sanchez was here. So the other thing, seeing old friend Luis Arraez, still is weird seeing him in a Miami uniform. Fun to see Luis Arraez play baseball again. Of course, he was Luis Arraez. Struck out a few times, which doesn't quite do. But again, Arraez is a good hitter against lefties, like we saw against Steelbar. Little tough, but Luis Arraez still does what Luis Arraez does. You still saw the head shakes, the butt shakes. Looks like he's going to the bathroom when he steps out of the batter's box sometimes. Just overall Luis Arraez shenanigans that are fun. So it was good to see Luis Arraez again. Miami's got a good player. I think he's top 3 in the National League in hits so far this season. He's going to be in the mix for a batting title, as he should be. He's a good hitter. That's why the Twins had to give him up to get a good pitcher in Lopez. And by the way, 2 prospects. So Luis Arraez is going to be a good player. The Twins didn't fleece the Marlins. Like, the Marlins didn't get caught holding the bag. They overpaid for Arraez, in my opinion, but they still got a good player. So it's not like they got fleeced necessarily, or got duped, hoodwinked, bamboozled, run amok, flat out deceived, led astray, all that good stuff. But some other things with Miami's ballpark, I noticed with the shadows is again, I know Target Field has some shadows. I know every ballpark has some shadows you have to worry about, but dang, it felt like it really had an impact on those Twins hitters. Like they were not prepared. Miami hitters are used to Marlins Park or Lone Depot Field or whatever it's called now. But Marlins Park, they're used to the hitting a little bit, as the Miami hitters trying to deal with those shadows in the shade, because the hitter is in the shade. Well, the pitcher is in the sun, and you're trying to track that ball. And you could just see the Twins were a little off trying to deal with those shadows. I don't quite know how much it impacted. I don't think anybody asked them post game, or at least I didn't see a quote about it. But I had to think that it impacted a little bit. Not at the end of the day, that's not an excuse, but it's just kind of the reality of trying to deal with that. And again, playing a day game, the roof was open, and you'll have to deal with that. And you'll have to deal with that at Target Field as well during certain times when you're playing day games. So it's going to be something they're going to have to deal with throughout the season, but that's just what I noticed. Also, through all three games, by the way, and it helped one team or the other, depending on the game, those umpires really like to give those outside strike calls. And I know the Bally strike zone isn't necessarily the exact strike zone. And in fact, umpires actually are graded on a strike zone that's different than the one that's on TV internally. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it really felt like they were given that outside part of the plate to all pitchers in that series, but like picked which team they were giving it for in terms of the pitchers. I think I put out a video of Livan Hernandez, and I'm like, what the heck is it with Miami that lets some of these umpires just have a gracious outside part of the plate? Because of course, Livan Hernandez in the playoffs had a bunch of strikeouts in a playoff game with the Marlins on a World Series run, and some of those strikeouts were atrocious. Umpiring in general has gotten better over the last 30 years in terms of strike zone, but still not always perfect. All right, so let's take a look at the American League Central standings. I think that's pretty much my thoughts on the Miami series. My thoughts on the Houston series is, if we talk about the Twins having to face good pitching, it's not going away. The Astros are the defending world champs. They have a good rotation. They're also playing Giolito, and they're also playing Dylan Cease, and they're also playing Lance Lynn and the Chicago White Sox next week as well. So it doesn't necessarily get easier for the Twins in terms of who they play in starting pitching. And in fact, the lineups get very, very tougher when you're facing the Houston Astros lineup and then the Chicago White Sox lineup as well. So we're really going to see now. The Twins they are 4-2. If you talk about a road trip going 4-2, the Twins will take that every time. You wish you could have gone 5-1, but whatever, you play on. You've played 6 games. There's still 156 more to go throughout the regular season. They all mean the same amount, but again, just we're trying not to lose sleep over too many losses while there's still like 2 feet of snow on the ground here in Minnesota. Anyway, the standings in the American League Central. And by the way, Minnesota Twins not in first place. It is, in fact, the Cleveland Guardians who have a 5-2 record. The Twins have a 4-2 record. Chicago White Sox 3-4. Detroit is 2-5. The Kansas City Royals are 1-6. Kansas City is going to be bad. I think we talked about that last podcast. By the way, the Twins lead the American League in earned run average, all of baseball rather, with a 1.9 ERA, which is phenomenal. Not quite sustainable, but again, this Twins rotation is going to be really, 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 really good. So now we'll get to see what happens when they face the tougher lineups of Houston and Chicago. And also, I think some other teams that have some better lineups throughout the month of April. I got to look and see who the Twins exactly play next weekend. Not that it matters too much. They go to New York next weekend for a 4-game series. So yeah, they're going to be facing some pretty dang good lineups in the month of April. And then things get a little bit easier. They go to Fenway to take on the Red Sox. Then they host the Nationals for 3. So again, Boston and Washington not going to be very good this year. Then they have a 3-game series with the Yankees. And thank you to Major League Baseball for getting the Yankees out of the way early this year. Just playing 2 series in April. We can forget about it and move on. And then the Twins wrap up the month of April against Kansas City with the 4-game series in Minnesota. So Twins home game gets pushed back. Really excited to see them play in 50+ degree weather instead of 30+ degree weather. The new scoreboard is huge. And again, I'm going to go to the Twins game on Saturday. So I'm really excited to get to see all the new improvements to the stadium. I'm curious to see the new big mini and Paul, the different scoreboards that they've put around the stadium. Follow me on Twitter at bombcj30. Want to post a lot about the new stuff at the ballpark that I see as I walk around. At bombcj30, at bombs away pod as well on Twitter, and bombs away podcast on Facebook is a good way to check in as well. So with the Twins home opener getting delayed, that didn't stop the St. Paul Saints, because they played their home opener today against the Iowa Cubs. It was initially supposed to be played on Wednesday, and then it got moved to Thursday because there was a bunch of snow everywhere, because why do we live in this ice scape that is Minnesota? So the St. Paul Saints, they end up losing 12-11. But the whole thing in the season with St. Paul is that they're going to, on paper, they're a really good AAA team, because in fact, they're like a quadruple A team. You look at guys like Ed Julian, Matt Wallner, Bailey Ober, Louis Varland. There's just up and down the Twins lineup. There's a whole bunch of guys that could make a case to be on the major league roster, but because of Solano and Farmer and a couple of these other guys on the Twins roster, Nick Gordon, they're not quite there. And who do I think is the Twin to get called up? Now, Ed Julian was a very trendy pick to make the team out of spring training, had a good WBC, had a nice camp. The Twins sent him down because he hadn't played any AAA up until this point. He's with St. Paul, and I think that was the right decision. And he's, through 4 games, has a 167 average. Again, he's got 3 hits, 2 of them home runs, if you're into that. So it's not all bad for Julian, but not quite the start you want through the first 4 games. But again, there's plenty more to get on the right track. But if there's a player you want to get excited about, and I think out of all the guys in St. Paul from the lineup to get called up, it's going to be Matt Wallner. Now, through the first 4 games, he has 17 at-bats. He has a 353 average, an OPS of 1154, 1 home run, and 6 RBIs. He made his major league debut last season from Forest Lake, Minnesota, played college ball at Southern Mississippi, found his way back to Minnesota in the Twins minor league system, and made his big league debut last year. And it'll be, because he's the guy that kind of gets forgotten in all this. Trevor Larnach almost got forgotten, and he's a former first-round pick. So with Kirilloff and Larnach were the 2 big lefty bats for the Twins prospects that took a lot of conversation. And then Ed Julian got a lot of talk as well. But Matt Wallner could get himself into a nice little role, because again, if Alex Kirilloff isn't ready to go, it means Joey Gallo has to keep playing first base, and it means Larnach is in left field. Right field is manned by Max Kepler. But again, if Max Kepler isn't ready to go, and I think if he does have to go to the IL, I think Matt Wallner is an easy call up to replace Kepler, because 1, he has already been up into the big leagues. He's been playing well early in the season, and he probably deserves it more than anything based on how much time he's had to sit and cook in the minors. Now, again, the option question, and, if you're going to only bring him up for 4 days, is it worth it? Whereas, if you want to bring him up, do you want to make sure he has a chance to stick? But I think if you call up Matt Wallner, it's better than putting out Willie Castro. Willie Castro is fine. He can play a lot of positions. He's a nice depth piece, but you don't want Willie Castro to be starting 3. You don't want Willie Castro to be starting somewhere in all 3 of the games that you're playing against Houston. I think if the choice is to put Max Kepler on like the 10-day IL with knee soreness, and again, to be retroactive to when he first got hurt, so he'd already have gotten like 3 days by the time the Twins would actually make a move. So maybe that, again, also goes against the case for Max Kepler Matt Wallner not getting called up, and just keeping Max Kepler on the bench and just keeping him day to day. But I think Matt Wallner deserves a call up at some point. And not just that, Max Kepler only has 1 hit so far throughout the season, only in 4 games, but still, if he plays through the first month and doesn't look right, I think you have to pull the plug early on Kepler. I know there's a lot of history. I know that, again, there's history. The Twins don't necessarily like to cut bait on guys. The Twins try to trade him. And the reason that they didn't trade him is because they didn't think that they got any value realistically to help the big league club. You weren't just going to trade Max Kepler for a single A pitcher like you did Gio Urshela. You wanted to get a little bit more. And if you weren't going to do that, you were going to hold on to him because he was relatively cheap and he protected you in case Larnach, Kirilloff, Wallner weren't ready to go. Well, now Larnach feels like he's got a home, and Kirilloff isn't ready yet, but Wallner at least has had a nice first week, which is encouraging. So I think Max Kepler, if he doesn't play well in the first month and he's hurt or both, there's no obligation to stick with Max Kepler because you need to put a guy like Wallner up there and play. Now the flip side is, what if Wallner stinks? And now you're, down two options. If you send down Kepler, he's going to get claimed on waivers. So you're losing him for nothing. So maybe that's the case, is maybe you'd rather send down Willie Castro and call up Matt Wallner, which could also happen as well. If you think Max Kepler is going to be fine, but also, again, you want Wallner to be up there and playing, and maybe Kepler goes down into a platoon role, and then Wallner ends up getting more of the starts. Anyway, again, there's a lot of like chess pieces. There's a lot of moving pieces around the board, especially when the Twins want to be multi-positional. So you can't just necessarily think of one or two guys. You also have to think of guys who can play multiple positions, like Gallo. Like, what if Kirilloff comes back? Then Gallo gets pushed to the corner outfield, and then Larnach likely gets pushed to right. So you have Gallo in left, Larnach in right. How does that necessarily work out? So again, there's a lot of moving pieces with this Twins lineup. I just have a soft spot for Wallner. I just hope he gets a chance at some point this season. I think he will. Wallner profiles a lot like Kirilloff, a lot of doubles, a lot of home runs. Strikeouts will be up there, but Wallner's a prototypical like 4 through 6 hitter. He's a prototypical middle, at least that's what he profiles as a middle of the order, maybe more down towards the 5 through 7 spots in a batting order. Anyway, some other things to talk about. I think we might have hit the main beats so far. The Wichita Wind Surge AA affiliate, of course, have Brooks Lee, the Twins' #1 prospect, by MLB.com, by The Athletic, a whole bunch of places. It's either Royce Lewis or it is Brooks Lee, but since Lewis tore his ACL, Brooks Lee had a nice year last year in his first season in pro ball. There's just a lot more upward momentum towards Brooks Lee. I think he's got a above 50% chance, not above 75, but an above 50% chance of making the Twins roster at some point this season. He's starting in AA, and they start their season tomorrow. Also, the Cedar Rapids Colonels and the Mighty Muscles in Fort Myers start their season. Cedar Rapids has Emmanuel Rodriguez, which I want to make sure I'm getting that name right, because he's a big Twins prospect, and I want to make sure I'm doing right. by him. So I'm going to look that up quickly. Yeah, Emmanuel Rodriguez is the name. Very big Twins prospect. He is just 20 years old. So again, like 3 years away from realistically getting to the majors, but at the same time is somebody who people, in the words of Palpatine in episode 1 of Star Wars, we're watching his career with great interest as he works his way through the low minors and tries to get his way up there. So he's starting the season, I believe, in Cedar Rapids in high A. Fort Myers is the low A ball affiliate in the complex league, and they call it the complex league because it's all the spring training complexes for teams. Anyway, I think I've rambled enough. I think this has been another Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube as well. And we'll be trying to do podcasts after every series, or at least maybe on off days, trying to find those times where it's good to record a podcast and can sit and digest a little bit of stuff without having to quite think about something that's happening or quite get dated too easily. At the same time, it's still fun just to talk Twins. It's fun that the Major League season is back and ready to go. So again, Bombs Away, Minnesota Twins podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.